Hey, Vlad here, DevInsideYou.com. Welcome to another video. In the previous video, we created a Giter8 template for an SPT multi-build for clean architecture. The template sets up the dependencies for us and even creates directories. But we can do better than that. We can use Giter8's built-in scaffolding features to generate files inside of these directories. So without any further ado, let's roll the intro and get right to it. As in the previous video, I'm in an Ubuntu 18.04 virtual machine, and this is exactly our template. We have it open with Visual Studio Code, and we were working primarily in this G8 folder. Let me actually go through it real quick. So we have the entities, we have the core, we have the delivery, we have the persistence, and we have the main. And inside of them, we always have the source main testing, main test, and we have our package, and we have the name of the application, and we have the .keep file inside of them. We're going to leave this G8 directory for now for a little bit, and we're going to create a sibling. So we're going to go to main over here, and we're going to create a new file, and it's going to be called scaffolds. Okay, and inside of it, if you remember from the first video, every directory that is inside of this file of this folder is going to be a separate scaffold, and we're going to create only one scaffold, and it's going to create an entire use case with the entire dependency graph, and we're going to call it use case. And we're going to, even though use case are two words, we're going to spell them together because I noticed that Giter8 doesn't like hyphens. Okay, so we're going to create a folder, and now I remembered I am creating a file right now, so I need to end this whole thing with a file. So I'm going to create a file called .keep inside of this. Okay, so we have a sibling. Okay, we have scaffolds use case .keep, and we're not in the G8 directory. Okay, so we're not over there, we're over here. Having said that, in the previous video when I introduced the scaffolds, in fact in the first video where I introduced the scaffolds, I actually forgot to include the scaffolding plugin to the project that we're generating. So in fact, we actually will be forced to go into the G8 directory, find our project folder, create a file in there called plugins.spt or anything else called .spt, and add the scaffold plugin. Okay, let's not forget that. So let's close this again. Let's close the G8 directory, and let's work in this scaffolds directory. In fact, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. What my script tells me is that we should also go back to the G8 directory and add a few cool things into the build.spt. Okay, so these are optional, but these will improve our user's experience immensely. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if you remember from the previous from the first video in the Giter8 series, the way you applied the templates is by saying G8 scaffold and then the name of the template. So in our case, it's going to be G8 scaffold and then use case. What I want to have is I want to have a command alias, okay, like this, and I'm going to call it Jan. Right, so all the Jan will do is it will go to G8 scaffold, and in this way our users will be able to say Jan use case. And also, even furthermore, because we're generating a multi-build, I don't want the user to care in which submodule they are. They should be able to say Jan use case from anywhere they are. Okay, so I want to force it to always go to the root project and then do / and then G8 scaffold. Now, what's the name of the root project? Well, we can just go and copy that. It is this thing. Okay, so it's this thing. We can go down and we can copy it and paste it over here. We actually don't need the backticks. Okay, so it's just going to be enough like this. Okay, so it will, like, for example, let's say that we're in core, we can still say Gen use case. It will go up to the name of our project and do / G8 scaffold. And let's also notify our users about this alias. So what we can do is we can say on load message, which is an SPT thing. Okay, we can display a message like this. Okay, so we're going to do raw strings, okay, like this, and we have \n, and inside of them we're going to do run, and then we're going to have $, we're going to have green Jan use case, right? So we're going to say run Jan use case to generate new use cases, like this. Okay, now there's just one thing about this $, right? Because remember, we're inside of Giter8, and Giter8 understands these dollars. We need to make sure that Giter8 understands that it should escape this $. So we need another hyphen over here. Okay, this way it will understand what's up. And green is just a tiny method over here, right? It just gets some input, which is any. It produces a string. Okay, and we're just going to say scala.console.green plus input plus scala.console console.reset. Okay, let me make sure if I made any typos. Okay, I believe that this is all that we need, and in fact right now let's go and try it out. Okay, so we're in the dev folder. Okay, we have the cat.g8 in there, so let's do sbt new file //cat.g8 because I want to see once how this whole thing looks like, and we already have in our let's collapse it. In our scaffolds folder, we have a use case, so we can run gen use case, and it will generate this .keep file. Okay, so let's just do enter, 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 enter. Okay, so it created my project. Let's open it with Visual Studio Code. Okay, let me also maximize it. Let me go into the console. Let me start running SBT. So as you can see, because we were coming from the scaffolds folder, it generated this .g8 folder. Inside of it, we have use case keep. And because if you go into project and project, where is it? Plugins, there we go. Because we're using the scaffold plugin over here, right, we should be able to say G8 scaffold, okay, tab use case. But we're not going to do it because we can do gen use case, and this is exactly what is being displayed here. Okay, so if I collapse the sidebar, it will actually look more beautiful, right? It will say set current project to my project, and then run gen use case to generate new use cases. This is what our users will see, and even if they are inside. So if we have projects, this is a multi-build, right? So even if you go inside into, I don't know, delivery, for example, from there, we can still say gen use case, okay? And it will go, and in this case, it will just create this .keep file over there, okay? So let me exit this Visual Studio Code instance like this. Let me remove the folder over there. And there we go. This is pretty much all we need. We can close this. And I believe this time we can actually start working on the scaffolds folder. To recap what we have, I'm just going to leave this G8 folder open. Okay. So what we have is we have the entities at the top. Below it, we have core, which has a dependency on entities. Then on the sides, we have delivery and persistence, which have the dependencies on the core and transitively on the entities. And at the bottom, we have the main method, which just assembles everything together, the entire dependency graph. Now, what I would prefer to do is to go, top to bottom, but it turns out that it's actually easy if we actually start from the bottom. So let's start by going to the main method. Okay, main, okay, which is over here, which again, it is still not in the scaffolds directory, and I want to complete the main method a little bit. The only thing that the main will do is it will assemble a dependency graph from a bunch of other smaller dependency graphs. So instead of this whole thing, I'm just going to say that this is going to be a sequence of dependency graph. Okay, it's going to be a sequence of, right now it's going to be empty. Okay, so in the future, once we're done with the scaffold, over here what we're going to have is something like user.dependency graph or user.analytics. Well, not or, actually, both of them together, dependency graph. And then, I don't know, user.traffic dependency graph, right? And then to do a report dependency graph, right? So a bunch of dependency graph put all together in the sequence, and a dependency graph is just a tiny type alias, which I'm going to have over here. It's just going to be a private this type alias dependency graph. It is just going to be a function which will take the arguments that are being passed to the main method, okay, and it can produce whatever it likes. We don't really care, okay, because all we will to do with it is we're actually going to run for all over here. I'm sorry, not for all. We're going to say for each, okay, for each of these functions, we just want to apply these functions to the arguments, okay, right? So this is the app trait, and it brings in the arguments that are being passed to, like a regular main method, and we're just going to have all of these functions, and we're going to say for each apply args. Okay, now as of right now, we don't have these, and our scaffolds will be able to generate these. So let's do this. Let's remove this one. Let's remove this one. And let's have this one. So we're going to generate a comment, okay, for our users so that they know what's up. And we're just going to say run sbt gen use case to generate one of these dependency graphs and add them to the seq. Okay, so this is going to be our main method. Okay, so our scaffolds, they will generate these entire dependency graphs, and our users will just need to go and add them into here. Now let's go and try to create a scaffold for one of these dependency graphs. Okay, so we're going to go to scaffolds. Okay, we're going to have a use case over here, right? So let's create a file. Okay, so I want to create a file called dependencygraph.scala. Okay, so it's going to be one of these ones. For example, this one, right? So for example, it should be like somewhere in user analytics. Okay, so I want to put it into some folder, right? So I want to put it into source main Scala. But now what do? we need a package, right? So we need to know for which application we're generating this, right? And this is a tiny problem because even though we have generated this entire thing with Giter8, our scaffolds don't know anything about this. Okay, so our scaffolds, they don't have access to this default.properties file, which is a bit grayed out right now, but I hope that you can see it. Remember, the scaffolds themselves, they have their own default properties file. So unfortunately, we have to go there and repeat some of the variables. Okay, so I'm going to abort that. I'm going to press escape. Okay, I'm going to go into, I'm actually going to copy this one. I'm going to copy this one. I'm going to go into scaffolds use case, right? So not just scaffolds use case, okay? And I'm going to paste that in there, okay? So now we're going to go over here and we're going to say that the description is going to be like this, right? So we're going to say this scaffold generates an entire use case, okay? And what we're going to have over here is, first of all, we're going to have a use case. We're going to spell it together. We're going to say as a default something like user analytics, right? So that we stay consistent with this thing, right? But again, this is just an example. The next thing what we're going to do is we're going to say package is going to be my organization. So I'm just going to do that package.com.organization, okay, like this. Okay. In fact, maybe we should do my organization. Let's do my organization. And let's also do that in the other default properties file. Let's do my organization. Okay. All right. So it's my organization. The next thing that we're going to have is the project, and we don't want to use the name variable because remember the name variable, they have the specific hard-coded behavior that if we use the name template field, then Giter8, even though we're using scaffolds, it will put our entire thing into a folder which has the value of this name variable. Okay, so if you do this, then it will generate stuff not into wherever we want, but into name / whatever we want. So I just want to avoid to use this name, so I'm just going to call it project. Okay, so we have the package and we have the project. We don't really need this. Okay, we don't need these two. Okay, so for now, this is what we have, right? So we have the use case, which is going to be the final, sub package, and we have the main package, packages like this. So now let's go and create the dependency graph template. And by the way, I will show you a better way to do this in just a few seconds. Okay, so we're going to go to use case, and we're going to do what I wanted to do a few seconds ago, right? So we want to generate a thing, and we want to generate a thing into main source Scala. Now I'm going to create more space because it's going to be huge. All right, like this. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to go into the $, okay, over here. We want to go into package. We want to use the lower, and we want to use the package, and we want to use the packaged formatting. Okay, the next folder is going to be $. We're going to have the project. Again, the formatting is going to be lower word, right? So it's not a package because we wanted to put it together. So if it says my project, I want to have it, one directory called my project, written together. Okay, now we're going to have the use case as well, which is going to be the final one. Okay, so we're going to have the use case. Let's not forget the dollars. We're going to have a dollar over here, or the money sign. Some people call it money sign. Use case formatted as a lower package and then packaged. And what we're generating is a dependency graph.scala. Okay, let me press enter and let's see. So this is exactly what we want. So when we're running the use case, one of the files that it needs to generate is going to be in the main project. It's going to be under source Scala. In fact, we've forgotten one. Let's create a new folder over here, source main Scala. Okay, let's put it up like that. Okay, so we need source main Scala, and then we have something like com.DevInsideYou. Over here, something like to-do app, and over here, something like user analytics. And inside of it, we're going to have the dependency graph. What we can also do is we can also remove the skip file because we don't really need it anymore. Okay, so now we can go into the dependency graph and we can pretty much use the same structure over here, and we're going to use this package under package syntax. For this way, we will not need to import anything. Okay, so we're going to say over here, we're going to say package, and the same formatting as over here, basically. Okay, formatting is going to be lower package, and I'm going to duplicate this twice. This is going to be project. This is going to be use case, and it's just a coincidence that they all have the same length. And let's not forget that we actually want word over here. Okay, so what we're generating is going to be just an object called dependency graph. Okay, and just to recall, let me collapse the sidebar. In the main method, a dependency graph is just a function from array string to any. Okay, so we can just copy that. Okay, and we can just you know, we don't really need to do this, but we could, right? So we could do this, okay? So now over here, we're going to say final override def apply arguments array of string, okay? It produces any, and for now, let's just do print line hello world. Okay, let's from time to time actually run our template. Okay, so let's do spt new file / cat.g8 like this. All right, so let's say that we're creating a to-do app, and the organization is going to be com.DevInsideYou, and the package is going to be DevInsideYou. SPT version is fine, Scala version is fine. Okay, let's open this with Visual Studio Code. And let me maximize it once it opens. Okay, let's also start running SBT like this. And for now, let's go into the scaffold and just make sure that it's there. You know, everything is there. Everything got copied over. Everything is fine. Okay, so now it will use this dependency graph to generate one of our dependency graph, one of our use cases. Okay, so what we can do is we can say gen use case right now. Okay, and as you can see, we need to enter some, you know, some sub use case. Like, what is my use case? Well, I don't know. Let's say traffic control or something like this. Okay. Now, unfortunately, again, we have to enter the organization. In fact, let me go and make sure that the organization is actually just DevInsideYou. Okay. So the package is just DevInsideYou, so it's not com.DevInsideYou. So as you can see, this is already very error prone, and I'll show you a workaround for this a bit later. Okay. So the package and project, again, we have to enter to do app. Okay, but now it generated something into main source main Scala DevInsideYou to do app traffic control dependency graph. Okay, so we have DevInsideYou to do app traffic control. Okay, so now we can actually go to our main method over here, and we can do something like traffic dot control dot dependency graph, and let's actually see if this compiles. It should. Okay, but every time we're generating a new use case, we would be forced to re-enter this unnecessary information, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a workaround. So as you can see, it actually works. Okay, let's close this, let's close that, let's close Visual Studio Code, at least you know, this instance, and let's also remove the folder. Okay, so let me show you a workaround. Let me open this sidebar. So we have this scaffolds folder. Okay, so we have the G8 folder and we have the scaffolds folder. Okay, and everything that is in the scaffolds folder will just be copied into G8/.G8, right? So it's going to be a sibling of all of these others. Okay, so what we can do is we can actually do this particular step, you know, the default properties file, we can actually do it manually, right? So what we can do is we can go and create a folder here called .G8, and under it we're going to have a folder use case. Okay, so the same as over here. Okay, and we're going to move this file into there like this. Okay, now in this file we actually have access to the variables from this one, from the main template. Okay, so we have access to these template fields. So what we can do now is we can say, you know, this one is still going to be set by the user, but at least the defaults for these ones will come from $package. Again, this is not recursion, right? So this does not come from here. This comes from the package over here, right? From this package. Okay, so we have package, and let's format it. So we're going to have format equals lower hyphen package like this. Let's not forget that we need these. Okay, like this, and the project is going to be the same thing. $name format equals, let's format this as well, lower hyphen lower comma word, like this. And this is all that we need to do. So let's do this whole thing again. Okay, so let's go and say sbt new file / cat.g8 like this. Okay, so let's say to do app, let's say com.DevInsideYou, let's say that this is DevInsideYou. That's fine. Let's open it with Visual Studio Code. Let me maximize that. Let's go into SBT, and we can already open the G8 folder, and if you go to default properties, the defaults will be filled out, right? So it put the DevInsideYou in there and to do app. So now we don't need to re-enter them again. We can just press enter twice, and this is also the reason why I put them at the bottom, right? So we can fill out everything that we need, and after that, just keep, you know, smashing enter until like there's no tomorrow. Okay, so we can do gen use case, and now we can say that again, this is something like traffic control. Okay, but this is already filled out. We can just press enter. We can just press enter, and it's fine, and it's in the appropriate directory. Okay, over here, traffic control, dependency graph, awesome. Okay, we can actually go to main again, just real quick, and do something like traffic.control.dependency dependency graph. Let's just run this one. It should be real quick. It's just only 2 files to compile. All right, so let me close this instance like this. Let me remove the to-do app like this. All right, so finally, now that this whole Giter8 stuff is out of the way, we can actually start concentrating on the clean architecture itself. Okay, so I want to go from top to bottom, but there is a problem with the entities. So we're generating a use case for a very specific application. So there's no entities that we can generate. I have no idea in which domain our people are. I have no idea which entities they have in there. Okay, this is also the reason why the folders inside of entities go only until the organization name, like this. Okay, whereas in persistence, for example, we actually go one level lower, right? We have the actual, the actual use case. Okay, so we can't generate anything for the entities, but maybe we can start with the core. So our template has already a folder called core, but we actually need to create it in the scaffolds ourselves. Okay, so we already have main, but we need to create a new file. So what our core will have somewhere, it will have a so-called boundary to the core, right? So all the users of this boundary, all the clients of the boundary, which are typical, either tests or the delivery mechanism, they will have to go through this boundary to reach the use cases. Okay, this is just going to be a trait called boundary.scala. This is a lot of stuff to type, so I have already prepared it for you, so I can just put this like this. Hold up, this was just the core. Okay, this is the core. The core is not the file. Okay, hold on. I want to do new file, and I want to do core slash, and inside of core I want to have source main Scala, and then this is the same thing as we have just generated for the dependency graph. So if I'm going to press enter and I compare it with the main, it looks exactly the same. It just said at the very bottom there's a file called dependency graph. They should actually start exactly underneath each other, and in fact inside of this boundary we're going to have the same packages, right? So we can go over here, I can take all of them, I can go to boundary, I can insert these, right? I can insert these, and I'm just going to create a trait called boundary like this, right? So this is the the trait that will contain some methods for a very specific use case, like for example updates thumbnail, or I don't know, generate report or something like this. Okay, so I obviously can't generate the methods because I have no idea what what I should generate. So the only thing that I want to have here is just a trait boundary. However, these methods are the ones that will be able to have access to the entities like movie or thumbnail. Okay, so they can receive, like for example, if you say add movie, the parameter could be like, I don't know, the name of the movie, but the result could be something that is defined in the entity, or it could be some intermediate data structure. Okay, just as an example. Now, even though I don't want to impose any particular testing frameworks, I do want to impose the fact that there should be tests. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this Scala folder over here. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to create a folder over here, new folder called test, and I'm going to paste that in there. Paste. Okay, so we have the same structure under test, and this thing is just going to be called boundary suite like this, and we're going to go in there and we're going to say that this is a boundary suite like this, and this is just a final class. Okay, so we have a final class boundary suite which will somehow test the boundary. Okay, and this is pretty much all that we have in the core. Now I want to save us some time, and I'm going to copy this entire source directory also into persistence and also into delivery. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go over here, I'm going to create a folder called delivery, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste that in there. Okay, obviously they're not going to have, they will actually have boundaries, but they will be called differently. Okay, so we're going to remove this for now, and we're going to remove that for now. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing with delivery. Okay, so I'm going to create a folder over here called, persistence. Okay, like this. And I'm going to paste over there. So we have source main blah blah blah, and boundary is going to be removed like this, and boundary suite is also going to be removed like this. Let me collapse that. Now we're not yet done with the core, but I want to jump into delivery real quick because it just makes sense. So if we look at our test folder over here, so we have already a boundary suite, which is a client for the boundary. Another client is going to be inside of the delivery project, right? So for example, if it's a web project, usually you would have, MVC in there or MVVM or something, right? So the client will be called something like controller. Now usually I don't want to impose names like this because I don't know if it's going to be a web application, but it's very likely. So let's take our chances and let's go and create a file called controller somewhere in there. Okay, so we're going to go to delivery over there. I'm going to create a file called controller.scala like this, and we can actually go and and copy this, because all the packages in all the files are going to be exactly the same, which is exactly my point. So because they all belong to the same use case, there's no need to import anything after this. All right, so what we're going to have over here is a final class called controller, and we have our first dependency injection. We're just going to use constructor dependency injection. So a controller is going to use the boundary, right? So it needs the boundary. Oh, come on. Oh man, boundary like this. Okay, and also let's, just for convenience, I prefer to do this just for convenience. Let's make the constructor private. Let's just create a companion object called controller, which is just going to be a factory for the dependency graph. Okay, I prefer to always extend functions if I can. So it's just going to take a boundary and it will create a controller. Okay, so over here we're going to say final override def apply. It's going to take a boundary, which is a boundary. Okay, it will produce a controller. Okay, it will just say new controller boundary. It's a lot of typing, but again, this is a template, right? So all of this stuff will be generated, so it's all good. Cool. So now we can actually go to the dependency graph and we can create this controller in there. Okay, so we can go to controller, to dependency graph, okay, over here, and we can say that we're not going to produce any, we're actually going to produce a controller. Okay, we're going to produce a controller. Okay, how are we going to create the controller? Well, we're just going to say controller. Okay, we're just going to say controller. Okay, and what does it need? Well, it needs the boundary, but as of right now, we don't have a boundary. Okay, so we're just going to do this, and now we actually don't need these. Let's not forget about the tests, right? So we also need some tests for the controller, right? So we're going to copy that, copy and paste it over here. Okay, so it's going to be controller suite. Okay, and inside of it is just going to be final class controller suite like this. Again, you can, our users will be able to use any testing library that they want. All right, now let's actually go back to the core and let's start talking about the actual use case that we're generating. This is the one, this is going to be the class that is going to implement the boundary. Okay, so we are over here in the core and we have our boundary. We will also have a new file called UseCase.scala. Again, it's actually 2 words. We need this package thing, right? So let's copy that. See, like if this was not a template, you would need to type all of this stuff out yourself. Okay, so this is just going to be a final private class use case, and it will extend the boundary. Okay, like this. Let me create more space a little bit like that. Now, this is a private class because all that we want to be visible outside of the core project is just the boundary. In fact, multiple boundaries for multiple use cases, but nothing else, because the classes behind the boundary, the ones that implement it, can be an entire ensemble of classes, right? So you can have like 5 classes and they will be all wrapped into one, and this one will extend the boundary. None of these implementation details should be visible from outside. In fact, the way we're using packages, this private thing is private to the package, and this will actually leak a little bit into the dependency graph, and I will show you this a bit later. But for now, let's ignore it and let's continue from there. So now that this class is private, how will the dependency graph will be able to create an instance of it? Well, the only thing that is visible is the boundary. So why don't we go to the boundary and create a factory there that will just create a new use case? Okay, so let's go and do that. So let's go to boundary, and we're going to say that this is a trade boundary, but it also contains an object boundary, which again is just a factory. And as of right now, our use case does not need any dependency, so it's just going to be unit. Okay, so over here we're going to say final override def apply. It's going to produce a boundary. Okay, and because it's in the same package, it actually has access to a new use case. Okay, so this thing will actually compile later. And again, I don't want to run this thing all the time because it actually takes some time. So I'm just going to run it in the end, and if I have made any mistakes, then we're going to fix it later. Okay, so now we can go to the dependency graph and just use this apply method. Okay, so we can go to the dependency graph, go over here and say the boundary is, for now, it's just going to be boundary dot apply. All right, now what about persistence? Well, similarly to the boundary that we have in the core, which basically describes a use case, we will also have another trait. We're going to call it EntityGateway, which will describe how to construct entities from something like a database. Typically it's a database, but very often it can also be a file system or another service, or even some in-memory thing, which is also why it's called EntityGateway. Sometimes, like in domain-driven design, this thing is called repository, but repository kind of implies a little bit more that this is an actual database. So I'm going to use the name EntityGateway. So over here, again, we're in core. Okay, like this. So we're in core, we have boundary, we have use case, and we have practically it's another boundary, but it's just called EntityGateway.Scala. In fact, we can go to boundary, copy the whole thing, paste it into Entity Gateway, and we're going to call it Entity Gateway, Entity Gateway. By the way, one thing about the boundary is that notice over here, it doesn't expose the use case. It just returns the boundary. Okay, let's go to the Entity Gateway. The problem over here is that we have no idea which persistence mechanism we're going to be using, right? So right now we're in the core, right? So this is not about the fact that I don't know what our users are going to be using. No, this is the fact that the core has no idea about the persistence mechanism. Okay, so we cannot have this object over here, right? I'm going to comment it out for now because by the end we're actually going to have something similar somewhere else. Okay, but again, this is just a trait entity gateway, and now we can go to our use case, and now we can say that our use case actually will use this entity gateway. Okay, so we can go to our use case, which is over here. Okay, and we can say that it needs a gateway, which is an entity gateway. Let me actually copy that. Okay, so now we can go to the boundary, right, which has the factory for the use case. So we can go to the boundary. It has the factory for the use case, but now it's not, you know, unit to boundary. Now it's actually entity gateway to boundary, right? So we can paste this over here. Whoops, like that, like over here, and we need to pass it along like this, gateway, like this. Okay, let me create more space. Okay, so now this is a factory for the boundary. How do we construct a boundary? Well, we construct it by constructing a use case. And what does a use case need? Well, it needs the gateway. So we can go to the dependency graph. Okay, over here, we're going to say not boundary apply. We're going to say boundary, and it needs a gateway. And for now, we're just going to do this like that. All right, so let's go back to the entity gateway, and you know, we can't use the same trick as we used in the boundary, but in fact, we can cut this out. Okay, we can go to persistence, core, we can go to persistence, okay, and inside of it over here, we're going to create a file, and I want to call it something gateway. Again, we want to avoid jar house, so we need to be a little bit careful with our names. Okay, so what I'm going to have is I'm going to have yet another a variable in the default properties files, and I'm just going to call it a db. Okay, so what I'm going to have here is I'm going to use the db. Okay, so I'm just going to have db, and I'm going to ask it to do a camel case. Okay, and I'm going to say EntityGateway.Scala, EntityGateway.Scala. Okay, so I'm going to create it over here. I'm going to paste that thing that I commented out. Okay, I'm going to have it like this. Let's not forget the packages, right? All the packages are the same in every subfolder. Okay, so we have this, and it's going to be the object entity gateway. Okay, but it's not going to be just object entity gateway. It's going to use this db thing. Okay, db, and it's going to be formatted as, you know, as camel case like this. Okay, in fact, I'm going to do that like this, and it will receive nothing, right? So I have no idea what our users will need to construct an entity gateway. Probably, you know, the database port or the name of the table or the collection or something like this. Okay, and what it will produce will be an entity gateway, right? So it will be found over def apply, produces an entity gateway by creating this thing, and this thing is going to be over here. It's a final private class like this, and it extends the entity gateway, right? So now we have the entity gateway. Again, our main, our dependency graph, it has access to all of them. So I can copy this, or basically it's this. It's the same thing, okay? I can copy that, go to the dependency graph, and now we can say that it's just this dot apply. Again, in practice, it's not going to be just apply. It's going to have like its own parameters. Also notice that we did not use the args anywhere, right? But you know, most use cases are not going to care about the parameters that are being passed to main. You know, this is not a typical thing to pass the parameters to main for big applications like this. Okay, but you know, just in case, you know, they actually can be used. Okay, so this is how we actually have the entire dependency graph. Let's not forget about two things. First of all, this will also have the tests. So let me copy the name and go over here, create a new file like this, suite.scala. Okay, and inside of it, it will have the same packages. Okay, the same packages, and it will just be a final class. And paste it again. No, hold up. Rename. Copy, paste again. Okay, so this is just going to be in something entity gateway suite. Okay, let's not forget to actually create a variable for this. Okay, so let me collapse the core, delivery main persistence. Okay, so our default properties files is over here. Okay, so we need to go and specify a DB. For example, it should be something like Postgres, right? Something like this. Okay, let's actually go and try the whole thing out. Okay, because we have been tapping for a very long time. Let's see if we have made any mistakes. So file colon // do we have anything in here? No. Okay, so spt file no, spt new file colon // cat.g8. Okay, so this is going to be our entire template with our entire scaffolding. Okay, so let's do something like to do app, and it's going to be com.DevInsideYou, and this is going to be DevInsideYou. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Let's open it with Visual Studio Code. Let me maximize the Visual Studio Code instance. Let me go into SBT, start it right away, and let's just hope that I haven't, that I haven't made any typos. Okay, maybe we can open these, and this one, and this one, and this one. Okay, so once we run gen use case, and let's say that user analytics is fine. Okay, so I'm gonna press enter. Let's not do Postgres, let's do Mongo. Okay, let's press enter. Package is DevInsideYou, this is fine, and the project is to do app. Okay, this is fine. So now when I'm gonna press enter, it will go and generate a file under a directory structure under to do app called user.analytics, right? So it's going to be there's going to be a folder user, there's going to be a folder analytics, and inside of it, in the core, there's going to be the boundary, the use case, and the entity gateway. In the delivery, there's going to be the controller. In the entities, there's actually going to be nothing. In the persistence, there will be the entity gateway, the Mongo entity gateway actually, right? So it will do this thing, and it will also create a dependency graph over here. So let me press enter and let me see if it's gonna. Of course, I made some mistake somewhere. Let's go up and see. Internal error, blah blah. Camel isn't defined. I found it. It's over here. Okay, so let's close this instance. And let's go into persistence. Luckily, it's only one place. It's over. That's G8. Hold on, persistence. This one over here. All right. So this thing needs to use that. Okay, like this and that. Okay. I wish that this was the same syntax in both of them. I have no idea what the reasoning behind, what was the reasoning behind this. Probably the syntax was created before they realized that they also want to generate directories, and this was not a good syntax for generating directories. But yeah, anyway, let's do the whole dance again. Let's remove that. SPT new file. Okay, so let's do again to do app com dot DevInsideYou, and it's just going to be DevInsideYou. I want to change things every time because I want to see that it actually uses my my values. Okay, to do app, maximize the thing. Okay, notice that Visual Studio Code remembers which files were open. Okay, so let's just do that. In fact, I could have changed it right away over here instead of going and rebuilding the whole thing. Okay, but it's fine. Let's collapse G8. Let's collapse this. So again, in all of these folders, it will create, once we run the gen use case thing, gen use case, user analytics file. Let's do Mongo. That's fine. That's fine. And this time it actually worked. So let's look at this. User core, it created the boundary, and DevInsideYou to do app user analytics. It created the entity gateway, created the use case. Okay, everything is correct. Delivery, it has, by the way, let's not forget the tests. Right, boundary suite, perfect. Over here we have the controller with the tasks, controller suite. Okay, in the entities we don't have anything. In the persistence we have the Mongo entity gateway. Okay, Mongo entity gateway extends the entity gateway, blah 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 blah. Okay, also there's a test, Mongo entity gateway suite. I forgot to paste that one properly. Hold up. Gateway suite like this. Okay, so the next time this is going to generate that. And what else? So it generated a dependency graph somewhere. Which one did it open? I think it's the correct one. Yeah, it opens the correct one, right? So it generates the controller boundary Mongo Entity Gateway dot apply. Okay, so this means that we can actually go to our main method, okay, and do this, right? And do run, and the entire dependency graph is assembled. Okay, so we can go and create a couple of use cases. It didn't find the Mongo Entity Gateway. Why not? Mongo Entity Gateway. Object Mongo dot apply. Is there a typo? Mongo Entity Gateway. It's this one, Mongo Entity Gateway. Let's go into the dependency graph. DevInsideYou to do app user analytics. It should have access to this. Why doesn't it have access to this? Did I ruin something in the main template in the previous video? We don't see the template here. Let's go into this one. Maybe I think I know what I ruined. Where's the build file? Oh man. Here, that should be persistence. All right, so I'm not going to regenerate the whole thing. I'm just going to go into the build file over here as well, build.spt over here, and it's persistence. That's exactly what these templates are for. You know, you do it right once and run everywhere. All right, so let's reload. Let's run. And this time it should compile. Yay, it runs. Okay, it runs the DevInsideYou to do app main. All right, now let's talk about this private leak. Okay, so if you go to use case, we see that this class is private. So if you go to the dependency graph, which is somewhere at the bottom, for which it should be invisible, we should not be able to do something like lazy val boundary equals new use case, like this. If I type it properly, Jesus, okay. Use case like this, case, Control S. Okay, so let's run this thing. Okay, now this compiles, and this compiles actually on purpose. This seems to be a feature in Scala, which I actually disagree with, because this actually means that you can hijack packages. So what is happening here is that this here is just a syntactic sugar. If you have seen my video about packages, this is just syntactic sugar for namespaces. So what is happening behind the scenes is that there is a curly brace over here, and there's a curly brace over here, and then there is a curly brace over here, and there is a curly brace over there. Okay, and the last one is over here, and the last one is over there. Okay, so now let's indent things properly, like this. Go one to the right, and then one more to the right, and then one more to the right. Okay, like this. And maybe let me destroy this so that you see the entire thing. Okay, so these are namespacing. Let me actually open the console again. As you can see, everything still compiles, everything still works, because this other thing was just a syntactic sugar. So basically you can have a project which depends on something. You can pretend as if what you're doing is inside of the package that is in that jar, and therefore you can hijack all the private stuff from there. Okay, so basically we're saying that we are inside of user analytics. So even though the use case is private for the user analytics package, we still have access to it. By the way, making the constructor private is not going to help. Okay, so if we go over here into the use case, whoops, that's not what I wanted. If you make the constructor private, it's still private for the package. Okay, so in this case, in fact, no, in this case it's actually private for the use case companion object. Okay, but if we actually go over here and say analytics, okay, then it will still compile, right? So that thing in dependency graph, it's still, you know, we're still inside of user analytics. Okay, so this thing is not going to help. By the way, I wish that Scala would allow me also to do this. Okay, but it's not possible. Anyway, so there is a tiny workaround for this, and what you can do is you can just cut this whole thing out, okay, and save the file, okay, and remove this entire file because we're not going to need it, okay, and we can hide where is it? We can hide the entire class inside of the boundary companion object like this, okay. So now, as you can see, this line doesn't work anymore. Okay, so now we have to go and remove it, okay, because now it's inside of the boundary object, and we don't have access to it. In fact, if I go back, we can't do, you know, boundary.useCase, because then it's going to say that it's not accessible. Okay, no, it actually says that it's not even found. Interesting. I didn't see it being recompiled. Why doesn't it recompile? What's wrong with you, SBT? Okay, there we go. Boundary cannot be accessed. Okay, so we don't have access to it anymore. So this is effectively the proper solution to actually put it inside of it. And maybe some of you are not going to like it, but basically we're properly hiding hiding this class. In fact, let me go and do this in the actual template. Okay, so this is our template. God help me. Okay, so not over here. So we have the core. We're just going to remove the use case, delete. We're going to go to the boundary. We're just going to put it inside of it like that. Final private class, like that. Okay. Now the next thing that we're going to do is not actually, is not something that we need to do, but I sort of want to have this whole pattern of creating things sort of the same. So if you look over here, we have a boundary and we have a use case which implements the boundary, and therefore the boundary has a factory. Okay. Now for the entity gateway, it's in separate jars, but still we managed to have a sort of similar thing. We have a trait entity gateway. We have the this camel entity gateway which implements it, and it has a factory, so it's done like pretty much in the same way. So why don't we just actually go and so I want to do the same thing for the entity gateway, right? So let's just take that and just hide this whole thing in there like this. Okay, and let's also do this thing for the controller. If you go to the controller, in this case it's slightly different, right? Because over here we have the constructor that is private, right? Because what we're exposing over here is the controller controller class. So again, what I'm doing over here is a bit of an overkill, but I just want everything to be as consistent as possible over here. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a controller implementation, okay? And we're just going to send that this actually extends a controller, but the controller is defined, just right here. So again, this is overkill, but I want everything to look consistent. Okay, so we have a controller, we have a factory for the controller, which is like that. Again, this is overkill, and even right now I'm not sure if I should do this. But in any case, nothing anywhere else is changing, right? So we're always constructing things with the factories, controller, boundary, or in this case a specific entity gateway. Okay, let's go and try to generate this thing again. RM okay, sbt new file / cat.g8. All right, to do app com.DevInsideYou, yes, code to do app. Oh, actually, this is the old Visual Studio Code instance, which is kind of funny. I didn't know that it would survive through the whole thing, but yeah, let's see. Okay, it's probably completely unhappy with me. Let's close it. Okay, let's see what we just did. Let's just freaking remove it again, just in case. New file / cat.g8. So let's have a to-do app com.DevInsideYou, yes, code to-do app. Full screen. All right, it opens everything that was already open before. SBT, close. Enable blah blah blah, because it doesn't actually exist. Well, you shouldn't have opened all of this. Okay, so let's start SBT, and let's actually generate a bunch of use cases. Okay, so that we see the effectiveness of the template. Okay, so we can gen use case. Let's do user analytics. Sure. Postgres. Sure. Let's do another one, gen use case. Let's do traffic control. Sure, also Postgres, blah, blah, blah. Let's do another one, gen use case. I don't know, user transactions, maybe user, okay, user.transactions, like this. Yes. Okay, and let's run the app. Let's actually go to the main file over here. Okay, we made mistakes. Oh my god. Okay, control implementation cannot be accessed in object controller. Did I forget to remove the private from the constructor? Yes, I did. Okay, let's do this manually over here. Controller. Let's remove that. Okay, so let's go to all of that. Let's do that, and there was another one, right? User analytics. Traffic control, this one as well. Okay, like this. Okay, let's see if it compiles. I think it should be fine. It just said SBT didn't recompile it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now it's working. Okay, so we can go to main and we can say that we use the user analytics dependency graph and the traffic control dot dependency graph and the user transactions dot transactions dot dependency graph, and let's also sort them all. Sort line ascending. Okay, like this, right? This is an entire application. I have no idea what's broken with SBT. Why doesn't it do that? I just changed the file. There we go, running. Okay, let's go to one of the dependency graphs and jump into Postgres Entity Gateway. For example, we can go and search for it, right? So as we can see, there's one in to-do app traffic, to the traffic user. Go into one of them. It looks like this. Okay, let's go to one of the controllers. Controller like this. It looks like that. Maybe we need more space. And let's also go into one of the boundaries like this one. It looks like this. Awesome. Okay, let me remove that. Okay, so it saves a lot of time to have a template like this. Okay, so now I'm back in the template itself. Let me collapse all of these. I fixed the controller, right? So I went to the controller and I removed the private from the constructor. Yes, I did. All right, cool. Let's do this. Let's do that. In fact, let me leave the sidebar like this. Let's collapse that. There we go. So yeah, we're pretty much done here. We have, very good encapsulations. The dependencies are pointing in the right direction. We're not bound to any testing frameworks, any web frameworks, any databases. You can do whatever you want with it. You can generate a web application from it, a CLI application, a mobile application. You can even generate an entire front-end application if you use Scala.js. And by that, I mean that this entire multi-build will actually live on the front end because it pretty much looks like MVC, right? So you can use the whole thing on the front end as well. By the way, I haven't tried it yet, but it should also not collide with something like final tagless or, event rotation with Zio. It should probably work. In fact, I'm probably going to try it one day, or, you guys can try it and let me know if it works, but it should work because there's nothing that should prevent us from using this with functional libraries. All right, so let's not forget to commit the whole thing. All right, so we're gonna add everything, commit -am. So let's see, this is gonna be video 3 now, and I'm just gonna call it scaffolds. Okay, like this, and git push. And what I want to try is, I've never done this before, but I will try to add this into the into the wiki of Giter8. Okay, so this is the thing. Okay, so we have our changes. Okay, let's see, we'll probably need just that, and let's go and find Giter8 wiki templates. It's over here, so I guess we can just go and say edit, and yeah, so at the top we have like some official templates, and let's see, Aka, Scala.js, Android, blah, 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 Scalatra, left. Others. Okay, so this is where we're going to add it. So it seems like it's alphabetic. A, B, C. That's interesting. Let me actually go back because it's kind of hard to read there. Okay, base templates. Okay, this is what I was looking for. This is why I didn't recognize it, because we're still, where were we? Scala native, others. Oh, this is where we were. Okay, so what we have is actually a base template. Okay, so let's find a place somewhere over here. Here. So let's find Daniel Spivak. Okay, so let's go. Boom. Okay. Yes, there we go. So what we need is, let's see. So we have, gonna have a hyphen and then dev. I copied it, right? Like this. And we also need that. And this is going to be https://github.com/DevInsideYou. I can actually paste it again. Like this. Okay, so what is this? This is a, let's just say a template for clean architecture. So like that, a template for clean architecture. Okay, I'm not gonna include the link for for clean architecture. I'm just going to leave it like this. Okay, so it seems like it looks the same as it looks for the others. Okay, so yeah. Edit a template for clean architecture. All right, save page. All right, it seems like it's there. Let's just look for DevInsideYou. There we go. Okay, click, and it goes to the repository. Awesome. All right, let me say a few things before I leave. First of all, one day I will probably come back to this template and add something like SBT native packager to it, so that this whole thing can be assembled into into one microservice or something else. Also, as I already mentioned, you're not supposed to use this template as is. Fork it, adapt it to your organization, to your needs. If you're using the same login framework all the time, the same testing framework all the time, if you're only building web applications, adapt it to your needs. This is exactly why this license is so permissive. Another thing that I want to mention is that like a year ago, I made a few videos about the cake pattern, and in there we created a to-do app, and we used clean architecture over there as well. So we used both the cake pattern for dependency injection and also the constructor pattern for the dependency injection, and both of them were using clean architecture. It's not exactly the same as we did over here, but it's very, very similar. So if you're looking for an example, check out those videos. I'm going to have a link somewhere over here. Another thing which is really, really important, if you look at our main application over here, we're assembling the dependency graph for every little thing in the entire application. So if this was, for example, a web application, and let's say that for every URL, you would have a controller. So basically for every URL, you would have a tiny sub dependency graph. You would need to assemble all of these graphs in the beginning of your application. This is probably not what you want. Usually what you would do is that when the user hits the URL, you want only then to construct this dependency graph. So it's kind of hard to show without a web framework, but if you're using some web framework, try to find an entry point, so to say, for a by name parameter, so that you can introduce this on-demand semantics. Most likely it's going to be in the controller. So most likely it's going to be somewhere over here. So when the controller is created, most likely this boundary is going to be you might want to construct this boundary lazily, so to say. Okay, so that all of these boundaries don't need to be constructed at the beginning of the application. Okay, but it might be also somewhere else. It very much depends on which framework you're using, and also if this is a web application or not. In fact, even this was if this was a CLI, in fact, in this to-do app that we have created back then, you have like, I don't know, 6 different things that you can do. Like, for example, you can edit a to-do, you can add a to-do, you can delete a to-do. All of these things, technically you don't need to construct the dependency graph to work on them, unless the user actually clicks one of these, right? So you can construct them on demand and thus save a little bit of memory. And the very, very last thing that I want to mention is that I created a subdomain for DevInsideYou.com called G8. And what it will do is it will go to my GitHub, DevInsideYou.com. It will redirect to GitHub, and it will search for .g8. And you can also do g8.devinsideYou.com, and you can also do / and, for example, something like cat, right? And it will convert this into cat.g8. Okay, so it searches for cat.g8, and it finds exactly this one match, because as of right now, this is the only template that I have, right? So just as a reminder, I have the same for the install scripts, install.devinsideYou.com, and I also have g8.devinsideYou.com. And also I have a code.radio.devinsideYou.com, which is just a Spotify playlist with peaceful music. All right, so yeah, I think I've said way more than enough, and I hope that these 3 videos about Giter8 made your hands itchy and you can't wait to create the templates of your own. As always, it's been Vlad, DevInsideYou.com. Don't forget to like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you, and if you learned something today, consider supporting me on Patreon. But most importantly, take care.